All right, you'll be happy to know that I'm starting this at around 3:06, so you can't complain about me sending this to you incredibly late in the day. Well, you could, but you won't be able to get away with it. So we're going to be talking about a concept called Mendelian genetics. Now, in order for you to really understand and appreciate Mendelian genetics, we have to dip a little bit further back in time and go back to the concept of molecular genetics and see how the two relate. Now, don't forget, we have this thing called the central dogma, which relates DNA to proteins. Oh, nice job spelling proteins. And if you recall, it's the DNA that is used to make the RNA, and the RNA is used to make the proteins. And so that means ultimately you are, because you're made up of all your proteins, you are because of your DNA. And I also like to add on to the end of this scheme that the proteins are what are responsible for your traits. And traits include not only your physical characteristics, but also, let me just write this out, but also your behaviors. Okay? So ultimately, your DNA is what leads to the traits and behaviors, traits, characteristics, and behaviors that we think of when we think of ourselves as individuals. Now, the other thing that's very important to understand here is that the DNA is organized, as we all know, I hope at this point, into genes. And it's those genes that are specific to particular proteins. And so if you were to look at a chromosome, let's say I have a fat chromosome here, everywhere I have a red mark is a particular gene in a particular location. And let's just say that this is chromosome number 15 that I have going here. And don't forget that if this is in a human body, I would have two chromosome number 15s, one from your mother and one from your father. Now let's just take this, let me zoom in here. Let's take this gene right here. And let's say that this gene on chromosome number 15 is a gene that's responsible for creating a protein that ultimately leads to your eye color. So we have something called the eye color trait hanging out there. Now that's going to be a very important thing for you to store away in your head as we move forward here, because let's see, I have it done. Yeah, here we go. So let's talk about what Mendelian genetics is. And you can see here I've written it, so you should probably pause it and write this down. Mendelian genetics is how genes are inherited from one parent to the offspring, or from both parents. I don't know, I said one. From both parents to the offspring. So let's change that. Where's blue? From parents to offspring, and how the genes from your parents interact with one another to express the traits that make up who you are. All right? So that means we're going to have to go back here and talk about some terminology that will allow this all to make a heck of a lot of sense. Let me give us a new page. So here we have one pair of the 23 chromosomes that make up a human body cell. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to stick with this number 15 naming scheme here. But you can at least see now that this is 15 from mom, because, obviously your mom's chromosomes must be pink and your dad's must be blue. And I'm going to, again, focus in on a particular gene which codes for a trait. Now, on your parents' chromosomes number 15, which are inside of every single one of the body cells in your body, it could be that that gene has the exact same combinations of A, C's, T's, and G's. And if that's the case, and they're identical, then you have what's called the same allele for that gene locus. So the location of the gene is called the gene locus. And since you have the exact same molecular form of that gene at that gene locus, then you have the same what's called allele. Now an allele is simply a different molecular form of a particular gene. So you could have, say, an allele for curly hair, and then you could also have an allele for straight hair. So the allele is a slight difference. The alleles themselves together have slight differences in their A, C's, T's, and G's combinations, such that they give rise to curly hair versus giving rise to straight hair. Now you notice here I just made a little bit of a change here, because I made the gene here for eye color on the female, I made it blue, and I made the gene here brown. Now, they're not actually colored that way in your DNA, but what I'm trying to express here is that I have actually two different alleles for the trait for eye color here. So the dad carries in his chromosome number 15 the brown allele, whereas the mom carries in her chromosome number 15 the blue allele. And when you inherited it, that means you inherited one brown-eyed allele and one blue-eyed allele, because each of these chromosome number 15s are hanging out in your body together with 22 other sets of chromosomes with all their genes and all their potential alleles. All right. So make sure that that term allele is clear in your head. This is how it's spelled. Okay, so an allele is a different molecular form of a gene. Sometimes these things are easier to explain simply with examples. So I'm just going to go ahead and start moving into the the Mendelian genetics of what's happening here. Here we have a male and a female, and let's imagine that they mate and they produce, oh my God, I did such a bad job of connecting that. And they produce a son. So I'll make this a male down here. Now don't forget that when you undergo meiosis, when each of these parents undergo meiosis, the dad undergoes meiosis to make a few sperm, the female to make a few eggs, that when the egg and the sperm are only going to have one chromosome number 15. Now don't forget that both of these parents had two chromosome number 15s in the germ cells, but the sex cells are only going to have one chromosome number 15. Sorry about that cutoff. My daughter just called me. Where was I? So they donate their chromosome number 15. Each of them donate a chromosome 15 to their son. And in this case, let's say that they donate a chromosome 15 that's in the form of two capital Bs. Now, let me go back a little bit just to make sure I explain what we're doing here. If you recall moments ago, I said that in this case, this is just a random selection here. I'm going to have a brown-eyed allele and a blue-eyed allele. Now, in this case, alleles always have a situation where one is dominant over the other. And we show that dominance by using capital letters over the recessive lowercase letter. So those are two very important words. We have dominant and then we have recessive. So if I have a capital B, which is dominant, and a lowercase b, which is recessive, if I have two of them together that are dominant together, then what this does is it's going to lead to the production of having brown eyes. If I have a lowercase b and a lowercase b, that's going to allow for blue eyes. It turns out that brown is dominant to blue, and that's why the only way you can have blue eyes is to have two recessives together. And then I think you can imagine that we have a combination of the two. And in this case, because brown dominates, this is going to be the brown-eyed individual. Now these combinations of letters that I'm showing you right here, those things are called the genotype of the organism. This, the outward expression, is called the phenotype of the organism. It's certainly worth noting that while there are 3 different genotypes, there are only 2 different phenotypes in this combination when it comes to eye color. Okay? So let's go back to this example we had here. In this case, if I have a male who is created from the union of the male and female above, right? And they have if we have 2 capital B's in every single one of the body cells of this male, including the body cells that are responsible for creating the color of the iris, then we know that this person is going to have the brown eyes. So phenotypically, brown eyes, genotypically, capital B, capital B. Let's do the same thing, though, with a female. Now we have the exact same thing going on where the parents are going to donate their chromosome number 15 to their daughter. And in this case, let's say instead that the parents of this daughter donated 2 chromosome number 15s, one each, and those chromosomes number 15 both had the lowercase b allele, or the blue-eyed allele. And if this is the case, then this female here is going to have the blue eyes. Okay, so we can see that's the combination we have. Now, when we have this situation where you have two alleles that are the same. We call that the heterozygous situation. Well, I didn't talk about this already, did I? Did I? Up here? No. Okay. There's wasting time right there. Heterozygous. And hetero, the root word hetero means different, or Jesus, Chang, you suck. This isn't heterozygous, this is homozygous. God. And that's because the root homo means the same, and zygous refers to the zygote, which is the first body cell that comes about through fertilization. So that means you're going to have the same two lowercase b alleles, or two uppercase b alleles. So in this case, you're homozygous for both. However, in one condition, you're homozygous dominant, and the other condition, you're homozygous recessive. So that means homozygous has two different conditions. Now you should know that there is going to be something called heterozygous, which is why I wrote it down incorrectly. But I'm not going to get to that right now, because what I want to do first right here is I want to show what happens when you have these two individuals cross. This is called a purebred cross because they are pure for those particular alleles that we're focusing in on. In this case, it's the eye color allele, and they're pure because they're homozygous for both of these situations. So even though it's purebred for one, it doesn't have to be purebred the same for both when you're doing a purebred cross. Now, in the same way that we showed the parents, when they cross, they're going to donate one of their two alleles. We're going to show the same thing here with a Punnett Square. Now, notice how I made my Punnett Square. It's very important that you do it the way I do it, which is a tic-tac-toe with a box around it. It just keeps things much clearer than if you just do the tic-tac-toe by itself. And I'm going to arbitrarily choose to have this is where I put the female and this is where I put the male. And you might say, put what? What are you talking about? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put into this slot right here, these two boxes, the different types of gametes or eggs that the female can produce. And in these two vertically stacked boxes, I'm going to put the different type of sperm that the male can produce in terms of their chromosome number 15. Now don't forget, we have other chromosomes involved here. There are 23 chromosomes altogether, but we're only focusing in on this one trait right now, so that's why we're only going to be able to, we can make this a lot simpler for ourselves. One trait. So what does that look like? Well, let's go ahead and look at the female. The female can only donate lowercase b's to every single one of her eggs, and in the same way that the male can only donate capital B's, because every single one of his chromosome number 15s will have no choice but to donate a capital B allele. What's an interesting thing here, though, is that look at their children. So what you do here with this box is you bring down the lowercase b and bring over the uppercase b into this zone. So this shows a potential fertilization event. So it's capital B, lowercase b for that child. And you do the same thing for all these, except, of course, if you're bringing this b, it goes all the way over to this box, and this lowercase b drops right down there. So we have capital B, and you'll see we do the same thing for every single one of these. Okay? What this means is every single one of their offspring are going to have the same genotype. So the genotype will be capital B, lowercase b, and they will all also have the same phenotype, which is going to be having brown eyes. Boy, that does not look like the word eyes, but I think you're going to have to bear with it. You know what I'm talking about. So in this case, 100% of the kids are going to have brown eyes no matter what you do. Isn't that sad? So you may have a blue-eyed wife and you're a brown-eyed guy and you want to have blue-eyed children, but it ain't happening because of the situation with the purebred cross. All right, let's take a look, and I want you to figure this out now on your own. Imagine that I have a male and he has the genotype capital B but lowercase b. So he is no longer going to be purebred, and he's no longer homozygous. And he is going to mate with a female who has the same thing. Okay, so no longer purebreds. And in fact, when you have a combination like this, where you have two different alleles, that's where we use the term heterozygous. And again, understand that hetero means different. Zygous means it's the first cell that came together after fertilization, the zygote. So if we do the same thing that we just did for our purebred cross, but now we don't have purebreds because we have what are called hybrids, And we're focusing on a single trait. Again, it's the eye color trait on chromosome number 15. I think you can see here that we're going to have a slightly different outcome. So I'm going to put the female gametes here, male gametes here. Now, instead of having the same, every single one of the eggs are going to have capital, or in this case, it was lowercase b as we saw back here, right? See, she only could donate lowercase b, so every single one of her eggs would have lowercase b. In the case of this female, she could donate a capital B or a lowercase b, and the same thing with a male. And when you look at the children that are created as a result of this crossing here, we have quite a different situation for what's called a monohybrid cross. So in this monohybrid cross, if we look at the genotypes, we actually have three different genotypes. We have capital B, lowercase b, and lowercase b, lowercase b. In terms of the phenotype, we're going to have three of them will have brown eyes, and one will have blue. Now, last thing I want to say, hold on just a second. Last thing I want to say is nothing. I didn't realize how damn long this thing was. Goodbye.